Welcome back to Anger FM's top news highlights of the month. Holy shit, was it a crazy month, ladies and gentlemen. So crazy it's 3 months after the month it was supposed to be about. So let's get right into it, ladies and gentlemen. Coming in at number 10, Jimmy Carter, dead in the crime-ridden streets of Midtown Manhattan. That's right, folks. Former Nobel Peace Prize winner and 37th president and avid practitioner of witchcraft, Jimmy Carter passed away at the spry age of fucking 100. Jimmy Carter is oftentimes considered the forgotten president to the American people, ladies and gentlemen. But you know who he's not forgotten to? Jimmy Carter won the election of 1976 against one Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford famously was Richard Nixon's vice president who got appointed after the GOAT VP Spiro Agnew resigned disgracefully. Let's get some rest in piss Spiro Agnews in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Rest in piss Spiro Agnews in the chat. Gerald Ford, who after Nixon resigning was thrusted into taking over the U.S.'s exit in Vietnam post the crushing defeat to the communist northern Vietnamese forces. And he also tried to take on stagflation that plagued America in the 1970s. Stagflation is when the commodity prices and unemployment soar while innovations dwindle. In the 1976 election cycle, Gerald Ford ran up against one Ronald Reagan, barely beating him out for the Republican nomination, while Jimmy Carter won the New Hampshire primary and Iowa caucus, cementing his place as the outsider Democratic candidate. He was the first Democrat to win in the Deep South since JFK, and also his performance in the primary started the trend of media tracking those first four primary states feverishly. Let me get some fuck you seltzer pollings in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Jimmy Carter went on to be president and embraced neoliberalism. Jimmy Carter was looked at as a failed president by many, and I think his legacy will be one that is forgotten. It shouldn't be, though, because this guy fucking sucked, ladies and gentlemen. During his tenure, most Americans would remember the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant accident, the oil crisis of 1979, and a big one, his handling of the Iranian hostage crisis, where America had overthrown Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh and implemented a man named by the Shah. But why? Why would America do this? Oh my god, ladies and gentlemen, this just in. Looks like Mohammad Mossadegh nationalized the Iranian oil industry in the 1970s, preventing Western countries from being able to profit off of it. Once the Shah took office, he liberalized Iran's markets and gave Western countries exactly what they wanted. But see, the people of Iran were pissed off. They stormed the US embassy and took American hostages, which then a fake sci-fi thriller movie created by the CIA got them out. The last part is not even a fucking joke, ladies and gentlemen. Please go watch Argo. But with this handling, Americans thought Jimmy Carter was weak, which he was, just not for the reasons they think. His failures led into the 1980 presidential election where Jimmy Carter got absolutely wrecked by one Ronald Reagan. Jimmy Carter was the beginning of the cucks, ladies and gentlemen. He was the original illusion of choice that has become standard practice for American politics now. He embraced neoliberalism and abandoned New Deal era politics that protected working class Americans from gigantic corporations. He lowered taxes on the rich while increasing the military budget by 10% each year. He saw to it that the trucking, airline, railroad, and natural gas industries all got to enjoy deregulation, all while gutting social programs, which is bad enough in isolation, but when you realize this became the standard for the Democratic Party moving forward, it makes it infinitely worse. The Carter presidency was the moment Democrats began to abandon working class families and began working directly with big business. If it weren't for him, we might not have seen Bill Clinton publicly call for an end to welfare or Obama bailing out banks rather than the people that got destroyed by them in the 2008 housing crisis. But shipping American manufacturing jobs off to other countries wasn't the only thing Jimmy Carter did, ladies and gentlemen. He armed an Indonesian dictator, Suharto, in the East Timor genocide, which killed 25% of their population. Hundreds of thousands of people, ladies and gentlemen. And when pressed by Congress to stop, he had his vice president just get the weapons shipped to Israel, which then Israel shipped them to Indonesia instead. During a popular uprising in Morocco against brutal dictator Mobutu Sese Seko, he sent the U.S. Air Force to ferry Moroccan troops to kill the protesters. He opposed sanctions to apartheid South Africa and vetoed UN Security Council resolutions that attempted to stop supplies to the racist South African military. He ignored Salvadorian Archbishop Oscar Romero to stop arms shipments and advisors to the junta that was massacring trade unionists and human rights workers, and he continued arms transfers even after the junta brutally murdered Romero. He sent military and economic aid to strengthen the Islamic fundamentalist opposition to the Soviet troops in Afghanistan, which were the weapons the Taliban used against us in the war in Afghanistan 30 years later. He increased aid that went toward Israeli settlements in the occupied territories during the Camp David Accords. He appointed Paul Volcker as Federal Reserve Chair, a man that was quoted as saying, "The standard of living of the average American has to decline, something we've been living with the consequences of for the last 50 fucking years." And finally, he used the Taft-Hartley Act against the United Mine Workers in 1978. He was the first scumbag president to denote American foreign policy as being one that promotes international human rights, all while arming fascist regimes to topple democratically elected socialists. He abandoned New Deal era democratic policies while ushering us into the zero-choice, two-party neoliberal hellscape we currently reside in. This man had blood on his hands. A lot of fucking blood, ladies and gentlemen. So make sure you take a look down at the ground at some point this evening, ladies and gentlemen, and wave hello to him in hell.
What makes capitalism work is the fact that if you're a able-bodied young person, if you refuse to work, you suffer a fair amount of agony. And it's because of that agony that this whole economic system works.